so cool to be a part of this. The Chuck Jones Center has been a part of the Tempe Arts, and I've been hearing about it since I've been teaching for them for the last 5 years, and I haven't gotten the chance to teach yet. So I'm super excited to be here with all of you, whoever's watching out in the Facebook world. But we are, let me just say a little bit about myself, I guess. We are going to be drawing observation. I have been teaching with the Chuck Jones Center for 5 years. I have been an art educator, and I got my master's degree in 2018 for art education. So it's been such a pleasure, and we do a lot of outside outreach in the arts for many different organizations, a lot of nonprofits. So it's just been a privilege to be able to teach and bring the art places where maybe some people don't get an opportunity to get it. So I have a little sneak peek of our drawing today, and I'll just show it in my camera here. There's a little bit of a shadow from my camera, so I'm sorry about that. But we're creating a hand observation with also the look, with also including surrealism as well. I love surrealism because it was around in the 20s, and they really focus on creating things from real life, but trying to capture our unconscious mind as well. So they take real life images, real life things from our general surroundings, and make it look more abstracted. So as you can see, I have my little earth here with my hand holding my little earth. So we'll get an opportunity to draw our hand, and then we'll be able to add in these little elements that will make it a little bit more surreal. So the perspective is making our hand either look larger or smaller than the objects that we decide to draw around it. So we'll start with the hand first, and then we'll get into shading and adding these different objects more towards the end of the drawing itself. I really love hand drawings, and I think it's really important for artists to practice. It's a tool that you always have. So if you don't know what to draw, guess what? You have a hand attached to you, right? So you can always practice drawing your hand in many different angles. Our hands are very expressive. So we can really say a lot by just doing a different gesture with our hands and drawing that on a piece of paper. As artists, we also observe life around us all the time. So while we are looking at things around us, you start to really look at the many different characteristics of objects too. So the shading, if you have a water cup, you see the different ways that the water and the glass changes the objects inside of the glass. You just start to really look at things in a different light. And hands are important because of the expression. If you really want to get into more figure drawing or realistic drawing, this is so great to practice because, like I said, it's attached to you. So anywhere you go, you can practice. You take out your little sketchbook and you just start drawing away. You can also, eyes is another thing that, I like to practice drawing all the time as well. So we'll get to it. Enough of the chit chat. So the first thing you want to do when you are observing your hand is you want to decide what type of gesture you want to hold your hand in. It's important to figure out also what's a little comfortable, because ideally you're going to hold it in that position the entire time. So if you, like in my drawing here, if you want to hold your hand in this perspective, you're going to hold it like that the whole time. You can do a peace sign. You can do anything like that. So I am going to choose another position for my hand. And if you see my hand go off of the screen a little bit, you'll see me drawing it. So you'll get an idea of the position that I'm holding it in either way. Now, the biggest thing, I try to challenge myself a little bit too, because if you are holding your hand in a certain gesture, of course, sometimes you can't see all of your fingers. I like to challenge myself and make sure I get all my fingers in the gesture. That way I can practice drawing every single finger. And it's also more exciting too, because then you add a little bit of perspective with the layers of the fingers in the background. And then you also get to add a little bit more shading as well. So I'm gonna draw it nice and big. If you are following along, it's so important to mention that you should take up your entire sheet of paper. In many classes that I teach, there's a tendency to like focus in a little tiny area and draw a little tiny figure right there. But we're gonna take up our whole sheet of paper. And all of you get to go with the flow with me, because I have no idea what objects I'm gonna add for the surrealist perspective, but that's okay. I'm sure you've heard it all day today too, but when you are drawing things from life, when you're observing, it's important to start with the most simple, basic things. And to not judge what you're doing while you're doing it. Because when you first start drawing, nothing is going to look exactly how you see it. Right? We're all just, we're adding these lines. We haven't added any detail yet. So there's no reason to look at it and not think that it looks like it, because of course it's not going to, right? All right, and if it is a little hard to see at first too, I am beginning the drawing, so my sketches are a little bit light. I promise it will get a lot darker as we work together here. Okay, so I've got just the general lines where my fingers are gonna lay on my paper. Now, the other thing you can do is also look at some of the shapes that you might find in your hand as well. Usually the tips of our fingers, you could draw sort of like a circle here. You just look at these simple areas. The knuckles I usually try to place with a little circle so I know where those knuckles are. And then I also can just make sure I'm trying to make it the same length as the hand that I'm looking at. So if I have my hand in front, I can use my pencil and use this as a way to measure it by holding my thumb at one point on my pencil and holding it up to my hand and then holding it up to my paper as well. So I'm measuring the distance between this knuckle and this knuckle here. The next thing you can do is use sort of, I always use circles. I always fall in circles. If you see other shapes, that's totally fine. But I have this circle here to show this area of my hand. And then I have this part of my skin on my hand that shows up and then goes to my thumb, which is over here. And then I can sort of show where the point of my thumb is just by drawing another circle too. You always just start off with basic shapes. You kind of lay out your drawing so you know where everything's going to fall. And then you can start going in with more of that detail as well. So you add some lines here to connect your knuckles together here. You can start adding some areas, like I like to add these little lines where the wrinkles are on my hand, so I know where those are gonna fall and where they connect on my finger too. And when you first start drawing anything from observation, I always suggest starting off really light, because then it gives you an opportunity to go back. So you can adjust an angle. You can add a little bit more detail. Maybe you decide that this space is too wide, maybe it's too short. So you can just go over it with your pencil again and draw a new line. Once we start adding more detail, then you'll start covering up those sketchy lines too. I have a tendency to draw a little bit more sketchy either way, if you saw that with my example that I gave everybody. See, and this one's fun too, because if you are drawing with me, since I work for the Chuck Jones Center, you can add little Looney Tunes characters in there too. Maybe that's what I'll do for everybody today. I just gave myself an idea. Look at that. All right, now I have this another area where this knuckle goes. And I'm going to add in here. And then I just want to keep checking my angles. So again, I'm utilizing my pencil. I'm going to lay it on where my thumb is. I'm going to use my pencil to figure out where the angle it lies. It looks silly on the camera because the way I'm looking at it is how I'm checking my angles, but where I'm looking, it is lining up right along with the under part of my thumb. So this area here, this is what I'm drawing right now. It's so funny because the reason I started teaching was because I didn't find art as an outlet for myself until I hit high school, towards the end of my high school journey. So I think I was maybe a junior. And then when I got to college, that's when I really started taking art classes. And when I started taking art classes, I knew right off the bat that I really wanted to provide this for people that didn't get an opportunity to have it, because I loved it so much. And I've always wanted to teach. There's just something in me.
Veronica would like to know what your pencil preferences are.
You know, I always use this pencil, and I apologize if I screw up the way you say it, Stadler, but I always use 2B or 4B. It's a Mars Lumograph pencil. I am in Orange County in California, and we have a really great store called Art Supply Warehouse, but that's where I always get my drawing supplies from. I'm sure Blick has these as well, but I love these, and I also have my handy kneaded eraser. And if you haven't used a kneaded eraser, I just want to talk about these real quick because they're the best. They're stretchy, which is a lot of fun to mess around with if you're stuck in the creative process. You hit that point where you just don't really know what to do. You can just stretch these out. These are great. Once you warm them up a little bit, you can really manipulate it. So you get these really tiny edges. So you can just erase small areas right up against the line, the main line that you want to keep. And then you can also, these are really great for charcoal as well, if you like to work with charcoal, for tapping and just removing it by tapping it on the paper. They're really neat. They are my favorite. But yeah, 2B and 4B, those are the way to go, in my opinion. Love drawing with those. Yeah, and I think that's what I used throughout high school and college too, was just the 2B and 4B. H pencils are harder. They're not as soft as the Bs, which is why I prefer working with a B pencil, because they're softer. If you are pursuing art, if you love drawing, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of different, what am I trying to say? I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people with different experiences with art. Maybe you've never drawn before and you're on the Facebook Live because you want to see other artists' work. Maybe you're just passionate about art. Maybe you want to pursue art, through college. Maybe you already are an artist. Actually, I should rephrase that. Everyone on here is an artist if you're joining us. I definitely would count you as an artist. But whatever it is, you just kind of find what you really like. I fell in love with these pencils, and I just haven't really gone away from them. I've been pretty loyal, pretty loyal to these pencils. But I definitely suggest, if you don't have drawing pencils, you need them in your life. If you love drawing and if you want to pursue it, you need to get some nice drawing pencils. Again, this brand I really love. Chuck Jones actually uses Blackwing, which is a great brand as well. We use that in many of our classes. This is the pencil that we get today because I'm at my house currently, as with most of us. And we use Blackwings for our art classes, and those are awesome, really smooth. You get really, really great results from using those. But there's such a big difference in just the feeling of drawing with a pencil, a drawing pencil, as opposed to like a regular #2 pencil, for example. Even a mechanical pencil, it's just so different. So different. However, like I said, if you use a mechanical pencil, for example, and that's what you've been using and you love it, be loyal to your tool. You can definitely keep using that. So I'm getting into starting to add a little bit more detail. I'm still not going too hard on the pressure of my pencil, just because I want to be able to adjust still. As you can see, there was a little bit, I adjusted a little bit of the angle in my thumb here. And then I'm kind of going back through all the lines, making them slowly a little bit darker. Maybe adding, I wasn't going to add the detail of my ring here, but we're drawing from observation, so I might as well, right? But this leaves it up to adjusting over and over if you just slowly keep layering the pencil. The other thing is just also adding your nails as well. And those I tend to overlap a lot as well, just because I'm not sure if many of you draw, maybe you've experienced this, but when you start to add the detail of nails and the cuticle of the nail, things like that, it tends to go back to more of like a cartoony type of look, and that's what we're kind of trying to stay away from. It's not gonna look exactly from real life while we're drawing right now, because we're still in the beginning stages. I haven't added any shading. It still looks a little flat, but it will look like that while we're drawing here. If you have a tendency to stay away from drawing hands, then this is a perfect little class for you. I always, when you really, at least for myself, my rule of thumb is, no pun intended, haha. If you really don't like drawing a certain thing, my rule, at least for myself, is that I should probably draw it more and get more comfortable with it. For example, like drawing from real life with hands, like you have all these little wrinkles, you have all these folds, like look at all this, to draw all of that, you know? So there's all these little details that you can add and mess around with. And sometimes it is pretty uncomfortable. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves as artists, and it's all a part of the process too. If it doesn't look exactly right, you know, we throw it out or we just leave it half finished and never go back to it. That's why I say it's important to not really put pressure on yourself when you first start drawing, whatever you're drawing, because it's never going to look exactly what you might think it looks like in real life at first. There's no shading, right? It still looks flat. So I am going back through these areas where I've got all these nice lines, kind of adjusting the angles a little bit here. I heard a really great, on the last artist, Molly, while she was drawing, I just wanted to quote her because I was listening to it and I was like, that is so perfect. But she mentioned that while as artists, we spend a lot of time creating and not a lot of time looking at it. And if you get frustrated or if you need to step away, I think it's important to do that sometimes, because then you take a break, right? You step away from your work, take a break for a second, come back to it, and you kind of have a fresh pair of eyes when you come back to it.
Michelle would like to know if your wrist gets tired and if you have any tricks of the trade for holding your pencil.
Honestly, if you are okay, so one thing with that's a great question. Trying to figure out the best way to answer that, actually. So I'm not really using my wrist a whole lot. I'm moving my fingers around a lot more than my wrist. So when I'm moving my pencil, it's just my fingers that are moving. I'm not moving my wrist around. One thing right now we're working on just like a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But if you have those really, really nice big drawing tablets, you want to use your whole arm. So you actually shouldn't even be really using your wrist a lot, because you're including the whole arm. You're really, especially on a large sheet of paper, you're using your whole arm. You're getting different shapes in there. But right now I'm just, with these tiny details and with going over the lines, I'm pretty much just using my fingers to move my pencil around. I will say though, one thing that I do, especially, I do a lot of I work with a lot of other mediums as well. But if my wrist gets tired, I just do little wrist exercises, honestly. And that really helps. All right, so now that I've pretty much gotten my whole hand down here, I'm gonna start going in and adding some shading. I have some lines in this background area that I haven't really darkened too much. So I'm gonna start darkening those lines a little bit more and then adding some shading in the back. Now, the trick with shading, and to be honest, this took me a while to really sort of get comfortable with. So if you're not really comfortable with shading, no worries. If shading is like you could do with your eyes closed, that's awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. Because when I first started really drawing, I was sort of uncomfortable with the shading part of it. I was taught, and what I continue to teach, is that you almost look at shading sort of like a shape. You start with, now the best way to explain that is if you are, I don't have the best lighting to sort of explain this, but if you look at different areas, you have this spot right here. There's some shading there, but I can look at that as more of a shape, right? Then I have this angle here. So this almost looks like a triangle. Oh, I'm following my screen, but if I look at it this way, it's kind of like one of those acute triangles, really small. And then you have all this shading in here too, but there's just like this line where you see the very obvious shade here. It's darker right up on the top of my thumb here. And then it sort of lightens out, but I just start with this area first. I start with the more obvious areas where there's shading. And then I start adding the less obvious shading after that. So right on the top here, there's a teensy bit of shading on this finger. And then you can see a little bit on my knuckles, actually. It's hard to, I apologize too, because there's a little bit of a shadow from my camera looking down. So it's sort of hard to show. If you got it, perfect. I'm so glad. But I'm just gonna go in here, and again, I'm gonna start really light. I'm not going to push the shadow too much in the very beginning. I just wanna get an idea of where the shadow is. I'm observing. I'm taking the time to look at my hand. I'm looking at areas where there's highlights. I'm looking at areas where there's some shadow. trying to figure out, like on my nail here, there's a little bit of a highlight, but nothing is going to be super drastic in my drawing today because I don't have a super drastic shadow happening right above me. There's obvious areas, like this part of my palm is in the background. So that is more in shadow than the rest of my hand. So those are the areas I'm talking about that are a little bit more obvious because they're hiding, right? This is right in front of, I'm looking at this right in front. This is not going to have as much shadow on my index. I have a little bit of shadow up here, which I've already started to create because of all my sketchy lines. And then I have a little bit of shadow up here. But I lay out where the shadow falls. And then I start pushing the contrast more and more, pushing the value a little bit. Now there's other areas too, like right behind my knuckle, my index knuckle, there's some shading back here. So what I'll probably do in a little bit is take my kneaded eraser onto this knuckle here, just to lift that, brighten that up a little bit. And then add some more shading down here. Another thing I love emphasizing is just really pushing the value on your drawing. Once you figure out where all of the shading is, it's important to really push the value, really show the dark versus the light areas on your paper. This is just when you don't have a lot of shading and the value is not pushed too much. So if you were to leave it here, to me, this doesn't seem as complete as it could be if you push the value a little bit more. We have if you have done figure drawing, you've probably heard this before, but or if you just like to draw from observation all the time, even if you haven't taken a figure drawing class, one thing that I always like to mention is that when you are drawing figures, when you're drawing animals, when you're drawing people, even trees, honestly, when you are looking at a person in real life, we're not outlined with a black line, right? If you look at my hand, I'm not outlined. I'm not a cartoon. You know, I don't have a black outline around my hand. And where you see, for example, if you're looking at a face and you're looking at the nose, where you see the definition of the nose is actually shading. So you bring these things out with shading. You start with some lines, you can lift them up a little bit with your eraser. But we don't have those distinct lines. Wouldn't that be funny if we did? We'd look so silly. Maybe not. Maybe we'd be used to it, right? And I'm gonna add some more shading back here. Behind this finger. And this is also where you include some perspective too, because you want to show the viewer, if you want to show someone that they're looking at your hand from a certain angle, the shadow is really going to help show us, okay, so this finger's behind this index finger, right? Because there's some shadow that's showing that the index is creating a shadow on that finger in the back. I have some shading back here, missing a little bit of lines, knuckles. The nice thing is if you were to say you leave this class and you decide you just want to keep drawing from observation, you want to keep drawing your hands, you start to learn a lot about the lines on your hands. And then you realize where you think there might be lines for where your knuckle lies. Sometimes there's not really a line that shows up while you're, depending on the angle of where you're drawing. Like I was drawing, this area right here. I was drawing these little lines for my knuckle and I realized that there weren't really that many lines. So it just don't need to put them. All right, so now, like I said, I don't have a lot of obvious shadow because of the lighting. The light source is coming from right above me. It really gets interesting when you're drawing and you find an area in your house that has a lot of shadow. It really brings out whatever you're drawing. All right, so now I'm kind of going in and darkening some of these areas where there was some obvious shadow, but I've noticed that here on my thumb, I have some shadow here because the light is coming from right above. So this area is dark, a little bit darker. And this is where you want to start pushing your value a little bit. Don't be shy. I'll just speak from experience, but I see this with students a lot too, is they get a little bit shy with the shading because it really changes your drawing when you start adding shadows and value. But you want to push it. But it's really, really great that you get, this is a full day of artists. Isn't that awesome? Have you thought, like every hour on the hour, you get a new artist, different perspectives. I think that's also really important to note too. If you are wanting to pursue drawing, you really need to listen to other artists and look at their perspective, because my perspective is going to be different from other artists, right? I mean, everyone's speaking from their own experiences and their own journeys through creating.
And speaking of that, who are some of the artists that you admire?
Oh my gosh. I really, honestly, with everything going on, I've been actually looking at other artists from different diverse artists, and haven't really been looking at a ton lately. So I've actually been diving into it a little bit more. To be totally honest with the audience too, I work with metals a lot too. So I've been looking at different people who work with metals, like jewelry, things like that. But as far as drawings, I love the surrealist movement because it's so abstracted. And famous artists from the surrealist movement would be like Salvador Dali. I know people have probably heard of him. He's very famous for his melting clocks. Magritte is another one. I'm sure many people recognize the icon. It's a figure with a bowler hat, and he's got an apple covering his face. That was a Magritte painting. And then, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about this question before. Scott put me on the spot, everybody. Let's see. Oh, Goya. Oh, okay. Goya has a lot of the sort of printing style. Oh, thanks for switching the screen. Sorry. He has sort of the really black and white. They're almost sort of creepy, the drawings that he does, but they're so good. They're so good. Yeah, Goya is a good one. If you don't know Goya, look it up. But he's really great. I don't know if I'm not sure who is in California and who's not. I know that we're mostly in Arizona, I'm sure, with the audience, but if you get a chance to go to LA, the Broad Museum is relatively new, but they have a lot of artists that are the postmodern era. So a lot of pop art like Andy Warhol and Jeffrey Koons. And Jeffrey Koons is an artist that's still alive and well. But this museum, they collect the postmodern type artwork. And that's always fun too, because they're really challenging. I really love when artists challenge, which is all art, really. Every style, everything that we're inspired by has all been a challenge from another art movement. Really, honestly, some people don't agree, but my own opinion is that art, anyone can draw. Seriously, anyone. You just have to practice. I think the thing with drawing is you have to have patience with yourself. Obviously, we've been working on this hand for 40 minutes now, right? I would not even consider it close to being done. But if you allow yourself to experience the creative process, part of the creative process is getting frustrated at times. If you allow that, go back to work, finish work that you've been working on, and just keep practicing. Like I said, when I am really uncomfortable or really don't like drawing something, I try to push myself to practice drawing it more, because it really takes practice to get comfortable. It's like playing a sport, right? That's why you have practice like every day of the week. It's the same with drawing. And I just realized as I'm drawing too, I'm changing my angle on accident with my hand that I'm observing here. So I'm kind of going back and adjusting some things. I'm not sure how many art educators you've had on this event, but I think as an art educator and even teaching artists, it's important to really make sure that we're also continuing to practice our craft too. Of course, we're teaching the next generations, right, of artists, and the best way to teach is by also practicing. It's not a what's that saying? Do as I say, not as I do. That's not how it works. You have to be doing it in order to teach it. And to be honest, I know we've been quarantined for a while. I'm not sure what's going on in Arizona. If you're all back, I think California is one of the later states to start opening up again, but it's been a great opportunity to reflect, really sit down and practice your craft a little bit more. I don't know about you, but I kind of hit this phase where I was like, I was all about not working. I loved being lazy and not really doing anything. And then after like a week, I was like, all right, I need to I need to get off my butt. I need to get off Netflix for a while. So crazy, right? We all had our different experiences in quarantine too. All right, and I'm gonna turn this a little bit. I had to move my camera a little bit closer, so it's getting a little bit harder to get into some areas. And I'm gonna push my shadow a little bit more. One thing I also did too, if you notice, is get those little folds of skin a little bit more too, so you can see that I'm trying to darken it a little bit so you can see better, but so you can see that it's folded. It's not just a line. Show that seriously, hands are beautiful because of all the little folds. All the things that we've done with our hands. I'm sure there's a wide variety of ages that have been on watching, but yeah, just think about all the things that our hands have done for us, right? It's pretty crazy. All right, I'm just pushing these areas a little bit more. So now that you are, if you're drawing along, maybe you finished your hand, maybe you're still working on your hand. Either way, so sorry. I'm just realizing I'm leaving the camera. Either way, once you start thinking about things that you'd like to add to your image, like I said, with surrealism, they a lot of times they take things from real life too. So if you just think of things from real life that you'd like to abstract a little bit, that's a good way to start. And you can kind of choose, do you want your hand to look larger than the objects around it? Do you want it to look smaller? All right, now I'm still messing with the shading. At some points, we just kind of have to decide on when we move on for a little bit. Because I don't know, maybe other artists feel differently, but if you feel that way, please let us know, because sometimes I don't think anything I've done, like I've kind of decided when I needed to step away from it and the artwork needed to be done, you know, because we could go back in and adjust it over and over and over and over and over. I always think, you know, it's us, right? We're our own worst critic. We go back in, we adjust and adjust and adjust, and then things are never done because we're still adjusting the shading. All right, I'm just gonna push these areas down here a little bit more.
Could you tell us, with all the shading in this sketch, was all of this done with just the same pencil, or did you have to switch different types of pencils throughout?
This is the same pencil the whole time. It's probably about time that I sharpen it. But yeah, I just use the same pencil over and over. And just adjust. One thing that I will say while you're drawing too is when you get into the shading, I have a tendency, I'm sure you've noticed, that I'm using the side of my pencil. I'm not using the tip. So when you use the tip of the lead, you have less control over what the shadow is going to look like. If I use the side of my pencil, I have a little bit more control on the pressure that I'm pushing onto my pencil, and then how the texture looks too with the pencil. If you're using, I'm just going to draw over to the side. If you use the tip of your pencil to try to shade, it's just not super even. You have some areas that are there's a little bit more pressure. You have some areas where there's a little bit less pressure. So I always use the side of my pencil. And I can go in too in little tiny areas, like in these folds, and I'll use more of the tip of the pencil to really bring those out a little bit more. But really, most of the time, I'm using the side of my pencil for the shading. And again, I constantly layer. You start off light, but it gives you more flexibility with what you're drawing. All right, and like I said, when we make a decision to stop where we're working because I realize we haven't added anything that's surrealist-like, and we're getting closer to being done here. So I wanna make sure I get there. I'm just sharpening my pencil for a second. So, camera. And what I might do is take my kneaded eraser that I introduced you all to. This has been through a lot of work, so it's darker, but usually they're a nice gray color. And these are really great. Really, really great, like I said, for charcoal as well. So it's really, I don't know how well you can see it in the camera, but it's really picked up. The whole side of my hand has graphite on it from my pencil, from just dragging my hand around the paper. But if I just lightly tap, it's gonna pull a lot of that away and really clean up the edges. And you don't even, the nice thing with kneaded erasers, like I said, you can manipulate them so they fit into these areas really well. And you don't even have to put that much pressure on them. They just sort of get rid of all of that. You can kind of see that line where I just removed some of that graphite. Of course, this is graphite that's just been dragged around because I dragged my hand around with me while I'm drawing. I can remove all those marks. I get a ton of like little fingerprints while I'm drawing all the time. And these are really nice to just clean up. So even if you don't make in your drawings, even if you don't make something abstracted, just the perspective of having a giant hand, excuse me, and then adding another object to make it look giant or small. It's really going to give it a little bit more of a surrealist feel. So you can add anything. I chose a gesture for my hand so that I could draw it holding something. So you can draw any sort of object. Say you wanted your hand to look really tiny, you could even draw some sort of insect here, right? You can draw like a, I don't know, what are people's favorite insects? I don't even know. You can just draw a giant ant if you want, make your hand look tiny. It's butterfly season. I've got monarchs all over the place around my house. Just draw a giant monarch butterfly. Or you can go the route that I did with my last drawing and draw a globe. It's so fun putting things like that into these little drawings. I love that we've been doing all these online classes because it gives us such a nice opportunity to meet people from different areas. I know the Chuck Jones Center is doing a ton of online classes as well, but you just see all the people that have tagged and people that join the classes, like from, you know, different parts of the country, different countries. We have so much access right now to art, to artists, to people in different areas. It's the coolest thing, even right now. All right, so yeah, there's a ton of opportunity to meet new people also and see what people are doing around the world. Such a cool time to be alive. Imagine being quarantined and not having any of this. What would we all be doing? I don't even know. Lots of laundry. Maybe creating art, but not having the opportunity to show other people or anything like that. It's really neat. All right, and if you're following me, you are seeing that I'm going back into my hand because there is always things we can adjust. But there's my little globe that I've added in here. And you can really add anything that you want to make it look, if you want to go the route, if you're inspired by Dali, you could add the melting clocks. The nice thing about the surrealists too, I'll just say this as my last note, is that they just really tried to explore the unconscious mind, dreamland. So I'm going to bring this back out a little bit just so you can see the full hand. And there you go. There's our drawing from observation. And look, there's the hashtag. Can't get away with not tagging. So yeah, to end, I'll just say thank you so much for participating. If you were following along, I hope you got a lot out of drawing from observation. So thank you so much, Michelle, for having us.